I know that during the show, you guys will talk a little bit about how you met back in Rio some 50 years ago, but I was really curious. You talk a little bit about it as to what the scene was like, 50 years ago back in Brazil when you guys met, and what the energy was like with all this new music that was going on and being discovered.
Well, when I look back, it's funny. It's instead of nostalgia, I think there's just an appreciation of the camaraderie we had. Was we played each other's songs instead of just our songs. He says, "Oh, did you see Jobim just wrote this one?" I mean, I'll say, "Yeah, but Lira wrote this one," and so that appreciation for each other's work was in the friendship. That's what I really relish the most, I think.
And Paul, for an American coming to Brazil in that particular time, it must have been a fantastic experience.
We had never heard any music like Bossa Nova. The night before we left on our State Department tour, and the we being my jazz sextet, it was a bebop sextet that had come out of college the previous year and won a college festival and then gotten this tremendous opportunity to do a tour for the State Department. And we were going to be touring for 6 months, 23 countries of Latin America. And then we were based in Chicago, and night before we were to fly to New York to then fly to Haiti to begin this tour. The fellow who was our manager, Gene Lees, who had been previously the editor of Downbeat, played us an album by João Gilberto called Chega de Saudade, which was the first of the great Bossa Nova albums. And we were absolutely mesmerized. Here was a very quiet, gentle music that had a similar rhythmic soul and beautiful chord changes to the jazz that we loved, except everything that we played and most of the music that we liked was kind of loud and brash. And here was a very gentle music that had this kind of soul. So we were very excited about it, and it was an underground copy of this album, which is not out in the United States. And it was 5 months from then until we got to Brazil in the month of June. And we came in from the southern end at Porto Alegre from Argentina, and immediately we're hearing João Gilberto on the radio. And a week or so later when we got to Rio, we were very anxious to meet those people in Jobim, and we met Oscar, and it was just a tremendous new chapter in our musical journey.
Well, it's amazing how that particular era, in the late 50s, Oscar, right until the mid to late 60s, so much of that music just infiltrated the world and has changed jazz forever. What happened in that pretty short period where it was kind of mixing all together, and it must have been a very exciting time in the music business. When did you actually leave to come to the States the first time?
Well, I first came here in 1962. Was the very first Bossa Nova concert at Carnegie Hall. And today I look back and said, oh boy, Carnegie Hall, and that was the first one. And then I was 22, and first of all I was busy because everybody came from Brazil with a little guitar, and nobody had a group, so my band had to accompany everybody. So I was busy writing the charts backstage, like I do today. But what was great is that American musicians themselves were the ones to spread the gospel. Like Paul is saying, they were the one that brought the records, and actually I think it started in Washington, D.C., there was a DJ, Felix Grant, that started playing the albums, and that was, at least radio-wise, how it started. And Charlie Bird had gone to Brazil and fell twice in love with the music. First of all, because, like Paul, the music was so, loving, but was for the nylon string guitar, his instrument, so was... Like I said, he fell in love twice with it. So he was the one who came back and told Getz, we got to do this. And so they did the Jazz and Samba, that album, and there was Desafinado was the first single who sold over 500,000 copies then.
How amazing that must have been back then to have a single in those days do that. Now, after that time, you guys met in the Brazilian bossa nova craze, but then you both went on to do such a wide variety of music. And Paul, you've kind of become synonymous with all that's good about the planet and what we need to take care of, and the opportunities that you've had to work out in nature. And I'd just like you to share some of that with us and some of those experiences.
A lot of inspiration came from that tour, which exploded our horizons in terms of understanding what a tremendous smorgasbord of music there is in the world, and different cultures and diversity of creatures. We hadn't yet really embraced nature as our home environment. That came a few years later when I heard the songs of the humpback whale in 1968. But the idea of incorporating different instruments in our music definitely came out of the Brazil trip, because with just hearing the music of Villa-Lobos and the way he used cello and other symphonic instruments, and I thought, gee, these are beautiful sounds. Why couldn't they be part of a group that improvised? And so in the late 60s, I created a group for which I used the name Consort, borrowing it from the bands of the Shakespearean theater that were called consort. It really means family of instruments, or it means as a verb, consort, to get together. But I knew it would be confusing people, and it still has ever since, because a lot of people think it's just concert spelled wrong. Isn't it? So it became a forum for all the musics I had come to love. And our community expanded when we heard the voices of the humpback whales, and then I met a wolf, and I heard wolf vocalizations, and that opened the door to me for what I call the whole symphony of nature, or the greater symphony of the earth. And but that spirit of jazz, of just being open to everyone, and being curious, and being the thrill of encountering people in different cultures, it's still there for us. And music has been the magic carpet for me to take me to these different realms.
Well, I remember as in undergrad studying your music, and I was always so moved by the sense of melody, and how the melody, I'm thinking of Icarus in my head. I remember kind of pulling that piece apart as a young musician, trying to figure out, how do you write these beautiful melodies that connect and sound so much like nature, and like they're just meant to be? They almost play themselves, Oscar. You know, those kind of melodies that just, like Jobim music almost plays itself, and so does Paul's music, and of course your music as well, Oscar. And you've had a tremendous career, Oscar, doing everything from film scores to big concert productions, and et cetera, et cetera. What are some of your favorite memories of that?
Well, first, listening to you, first of all, it's interesting what you said about melodies, because I think of the elements of music, melody is the one that has the most mnemonic power. And it's an interesting contrast, because percussion is so alive and it's so immediate. Percussion makes you want to move here and jump, but I wonder if, like, 20 years from now, you would do here, and you say, oh, I remember. But you hear the melody, and it says, oh my God, I was 14 years old, her name was Mary, and I crossed the room to ask her to dance, and she said no. Something like that. But melody has a mnemonic power, and throughout, if you look, like Paul is saying, the voices of the animals, they are melodies, and in that song stays with you forever. And when you talk about memories, there are so many, but we did an album together, his album called Common Ground, and it was the first time he started incorporating, I remember, like today, the Eagle and Paul McCandless on oboe, and that's an eye-opener, and those are things that stay with you forever.
That's fantastic. We've got a few minutes left here. I wonder if there's any I've got a million questions, but I'll share. Any questions here for the audience, for Paul or Oscar or both of them? Anybody got anything that's on your mind? Don't be shy. Yes?
I wanted to ask Paul what it was like working with George Martin on the first album.
The album that George Martin produced for us was called Icarus. It was it was the fourth consort album, but it's often thought of as the first one because it was the one that was that got out there furthest. I've always described George Martin as kind of a cross between Prince Philip and Stan Kenton. A very tall, regal, dignified man, but with a tremendous sense of humor. And we stumbled into that connection. In 1970, we were with a manager named Bennett Glotzer, who had a rock band named Sea Train, and he had, shortly after, this was just at the end of the Beatles, he had convinced George Martin to come over and produce an album with Sea Train. And George came for kind of a preliminary hearing of this group in December of 1970 to a concert they were doing at Carnegie Hall. And Bennett thought it might be good if he could get George to have lunch with me, and so I could tell him about our group. And at that time, the group had oboe and sax, cello, guitar, bass, and percussion. And George was fascinated hearing about the group because he was an oboist. He had played oboe in the Sadler Wells Ballet Orchestra before he became a producer. So he agreed to produce us as well, and he was coming back for 3 weeks the next summer, and we rented a house in Marblehead, Massachusetts, the idea being he'd bring his family, and they'd live in a beachside house, and every morning everybody would go to the beach, and in the afternoon would go in this rented house and record. And it was the ideal, the most ideal recording environment we'd ever had. And it was a great experience. He was a very, very kind and very affirming kind of guy to work with. And it was a great relationship. I've seen him a few times since then, and he was certainly a mentor.
Fantastic. We got time for one more. Any other questions out here? I've got one, guys. These guys rehearsed some 5 hours yesterday almost, then played a concert. Paul drove 9 hours the day before. I'm always absolutely inspired when I see musicians like yourselves that have been in the music business 50 plus years and are just full of life and energy, as you're about to see here. What's next for you, Oscar? What's one of the next projects?
Well, I have a recording session Saturday in Los Angeles with Dave Grusin. The 27th, I go to Belgium to play with Toots Thielemans, who turns 90.
Who's doing better, by the way, because as many of you know, Toots was supposed to be here a couple weeks ago, and Oscar and Toots, you probably saw them here together. We're very good friends, and I hear that he's feeling a little bit better.
I was supposed to play with him 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, and he canceled, you know. And I think at 9 you can do anything you want, and you should. But he's doing great, and there's a party on the 29th, which is his birthday, and then as a trooper he has 2 concerts on the 30th and the 31st, so I'm going to be part of that. So, and then I'll take a week off. I'm going to see my brother in Paris, and then I put 2 more concerts with him, and then I come back and do other things.
That's great. And what's next for you, Paul?
Well, the thing I'm most excited about is going back home to Connecticut and seeing my little girls. They're 15 and 7. That's become, used to be my band was the most exciting realm in the world, and I stumbled into family life at a later age than most of my contemporaries. So that's big excitement for me. And then on the professional front, I get to go to Japan at the end of the month for a tour and play 3 concerts in the museum there where we did our most recent album. It's called Miho Journey to the Mountain, and it's this Miho Museum in the Shigaraki Mountains of Japan near Kyoto. And this morning I got to have an amazing hour with Bill Strickland, and to hear the whole story of the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and to see the amazing artwork that he has, and to see his pottery studio. And he knew all about the potters of Shigaraki, and one of them had come here to teach. And so I mean, there have been so many connections that we've experienced this week related to this great story here, and this is just another one. And seeing the art around this building makes me really resonate with. I mean, it is very resonant with this fantastic museum in Japan.
Sounds like it's going to be a nice little time for you guys in the future. How about a hand for Paul Winter and Oscar Castroneves?
Thank you.
We'll be right back with you in just a few minutes.